Well, good morning, guys. You guys pumped to be at church this weekend? Man, it's so good to see you guys. If we have not been able to meet before, my name is Cotter, and I am the Next Steps pastor here at Bay Shore. And man, it's July 4th weekend, which is kind of crazy. It feels like summer just started, and July 4th to me is like, oh my goodness, it's like flying by. It's like halfway over. But man, you guys are amazing for coming out to church this morning. When I got here at 7:30, the giant parking lot was full already. So I know you guys had to battle some traffic. So man, you guys are amazing making the drive out here today. We're so glad that you did that. And we're also thankful for everybody that stayed home today and is watching this online. So I just want to give a huge shout out to a couple people that are watching online today. Nick and Sherry, we're so thankful for you guys. I met Nick a few months ago. He works over at the veterinarian office, and he takes care of our dog. And so I was over there, and he was taking care of my dog. And so Nick is awesome. Nick, I'm pumped for you, man. I really appreciate you. So can we make some noise for Nick and Sherry and everybody that's online? So summer's a good time for road trips, right? Like driving the opposite way of all the beach traffic and just going somewhere inland away from all the traffic. It's just a perfect time to travel. And my family and I, we were able to get away a few weeks ago, and we went to Virginia. And now when I'm on a road trip, even if I know where I'm going, I have Google Maps up on my phone the entire time. Is anybody else like that? You just gotta have Google Maps up. Man, there's just like something peaceful about having a little robot voice that's telling me I'm going in the right direction. Like, I love that. And I like the map with the little lanes that show you where you're supposed to go. I think that is so cool. So the whole trip a few weeks ago, I had Google Maps up on my phone, and I could probably drive to that place blindfolded. Like, I've been going there every summer my entire life, but I think it comes from when I first started driving, because we didn't have that technology back then. I remember growing up, and all of our family road trips were my parents with the big fold-out maps. You know, the ones that, like, you get a different one from every state. They're absolutely gigantic, and you can't read them, but you pretend like you know what you're doing and reading them. So family trips growing up with those were not safe. And then a few years later, like around the time when I got my license, they invented MapQuest. How many of you guys use MapQuest? Man, MapQuest was pretty cool. You had all the like step-by-step instructions. You dial into your AOL like free internet trial on your computer and print this out. And yeah, they had like these tiny little maps and these really confusing directions like turn right on 221 for 0.32 miles. I don't know what that means, but MapQuest was cool. It was better than the big maps. It was still pretty confusing. And then technology advanced a bit, and they invented Garmins. You guys remember Garmins? Those things were around for about as long as Palm Pilots. But they were pretty cool for a little bit. I remember when my dad got one, and yeah, you'd like suction cup them to the windshield. And the coolest thing was you could turn that little blue arrow that represents your car, you could turn it into anything. You could turn it into a spaceship from Star Wars. You could turn it into anything. That was the coolest thing. But Garmin's, like, they were cool for the time for sure, but they also had some problems. Like, you had to update the maps all the time. They wouldn't automatically update. And I remember we didn't pay for the upgrades. Like, if you wanted current maps, you had to buy them, and you had to plug it into your computer. We didn't do that. We just, whatever came with it is what we were going to use. And in high school, I worked for my dad, and we were, working at different job sites, driving around a lot. And I remember in that work truck, we had a super old Garmin that was very out of date. And I can't tell you how many times it told me to turn left into a cornfield where there was absolutely no road. Those things, they were cool, but they were kind of sketchy. I definitely blamed a lot of my bad driving decisions back then on Garmin's. And now we've got iPhones, and they always know where we are, which is kind of creepy, but it is kind of nice to know where we're going when we're driving. And man, it's so important to have something that is helping us go in the right direction, isn't it? Like, whether it is when we are driving in the car or whether it's in life, we need something that is keeping us moving on the right path, keeping us on track. And if we're going to keep moving in life through the life that God has for us, then we need things that are going to keep us going in the right direction. So that's what we're going to look at for the next couple of weeks. We're going to look at some things that keep us going in the right direction. And we're going to start today by looking at a story from the Old Testament of the Bible. We're going to be talking about this guy named Jonah. How many of you guys have heard of a guy named Jonah? Now, whether you have never been in a church before this moment, or if you're like me and you grew up in Christian school and you watched Jonah VeggieTales growing up, you've probably heard of Jonah. VeggieTales is awesome. It's not in my notes, but Jonah VeggieTales is just very amazing. And so Jonah's a really popular guy, and he's actually memorable mostly because of how bad his decision-making was. Like, Jonah just made some horrible, horrible choices, and it got him into some really heavy situations. His story starts out with God asking him to do something, and Jonah's response was to say, no, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what you asked me to do. And so it starts out, the third verse of his story says that Jonah ran away from the Lord. So this guy, he's trying to run away from God. God who made the earth and made Jonah and knows everything and can see everything. Jonah tries to run away from him, which is just a terrible decision. And there's a lot of cool things that we can learn from Jonah. We could probably study his story for a long time, but I want to hit the fast forward button on the early part of his story to get to what I want us to look at today. So Jonah tries to run away from God, and obviously that did not work, and he's trying to run away. So he hops on this boat, and he starts sailing, and then this big storm came up. He ended up getting thrown overboard off of the boat. Then he got swallowed by a huge fish. And as awful as that sounds, the Bible actually tells us that God sent that fish to rescue Jonah from drowning. But man, things were not going good for him. You know, he is having a really, really rough time. And all of that was because of his decision to not listen to God. And that brings us to the section that we're going to look at today. Jonah's been through this journey of running from God, and then he's swallowed by this huge fish. And while he's inside of this fish, he starts praying to God. And this is really the turning point of Jonah's story. Like, he had some challenges later on in his life, but this is the moment where he realized that even though he tried to run away from God, God still cared about him. And God had still provided for him. And I love this so much because Jonah gains perspective of his situation at this time. Before this point, he was just focused on running from God, on doing his own thing, but here he takes a step back to acknowledge that he messed up. And by doing that, he gains an appreciation for how patient God was with him. And I think what we see the most through Jonah's prayer in these verses we'll check out today is just how thankful he was. And that thankfulness, it got Jonah back on course. It got him heading back in the right direction. And after this prayer in the Bible, it says that Jonah escaped the fish, and he ended up obeying God's original request. This prayer, it totally changed things for Jonah. And I believe that the thankfulness that he expressed in this prayer was a big reason for that. And so today, we're going to look at how thankfulness gets us going in the right direction. Jonah's thankfulness, it changed the course of his life. Things were going so bad, so fast for him, but when he stopped running from God and he started thanking God, that's when things changed for him. So let's hop in here. We're going to be in Jonah chapter 2. We're going to start out in verse 2. And if you have your Bible, you can follow along with us. We're in the Old Testament. We're also going to have everything up on our screens this morning so you can follow along. So this is Jonah 2, verse 2. It says, he said, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me. So Jonah had disobeyed God, and his disobedience caused this great storm to come up, and then he ended up getting thrown off of the boat, and he was sinking in the water. He thought he was going to drown, but then God rescued him. Now, God rescued him in a super strange way by having this fish come up and swallow him, but he still rescued him even though Jonah had run away. Even though Jonah disobeyed God, God still cared about him and rescued him. And so Jonah's in this fish, and he's thinking back over all that had happened, and he's choosing to focus on the rescue and not on all of his pain. He is choosing to focus on still being alive, not on the bad situation that he was still in. And he chose to find something to be thankful about rather than complaining about all of the negatives that were right in front of him. And I think the lesson for us is that in life we can choose to be frustrated by the things that go wrong, or we can choose to look for something to be thankful for. We can choose to be frustrated by all the things that go wrong, or we can be thankful and choose to find something to be thankful for. That's what Jonah did here. Like, he had a long list of reasons to complain that were right in front of him. He could have been upset and bitter and bummed out, but he chose to ignore all of those negatives, and he looked for things to be thankful for. So the first way that thankfulness gets us going in the right direction is that thankfulness overcomes negativity. Thankfulness overcomes negativity. When we're thankful, we see the good. We see the reason to praise, the reason to be joyful. And we'll toss this verse up again, back up on the screen. I want to read this one more time. It says, "I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me." So Jonah, he's thanking God for how God provided for him. It says that he called out to God in his trouble, and God answered him. It says that he was dying, and he called out to God, and God heard him. And what stands out to me is that he's choosing to see the good here. He's choosing to find the good. He could have complained and been upset about how he was suffering. He could have been upset about how long it took for God to rescue him. He could have complained about all kinds of things, but he chose to be thankful for what God did for him. So he overcame those negative thoughts by choosing to be thankful. Now, a few weeks ago, I had like one of the best weekends of my whole year. I was able to go down to my grandparents' beach house with my brother, and we just hung out for a whole weekend. Just us. We played Xbox and bodyboarded and ate a ton of Pringles. It was like hopping in a time machine back to when I was 14 years old. It was so much fun. We got a picture of my brother and I that we can toss up on the screen. That's my brother on the right and me on the other side. We just had such a fun time, and it was cool. It was like a nostalgic weekend because we spent so much time growing up at my grandparents' house. But the one thing about grandparent houses is they can be like super creepy. Like, really, really creepy. To this day, I am still terrified of going in the basement of my grandparents' house. It just creeps me out, man. Like, that house is almost 100 years old, and I have no idea what's been growing in there all these years. I don't know what's living down there. Like, those things are creepy. Is anybody else scared of going in your grandparents' house growing up? Man, I have never seen crickets that can jump and fly and do all the things that the crickets in grandparent houses can do. And so, a few years ago, I was down there with my mom and my grandmother and my brother, and so we were down there at the house, and we found this bat in my grandmother's room, and not like a baseball bat, not like a cool bat, like a living, flying animal bat. And in my mind, all bats like either turn you into Batman or they are just like terrible and they have rabies. And I don't know if all bats have rabies. I think I saw that on an episode of The Office, but that's just what I think of. And so I was terrified, like really scared. But since my brother and I were the young ones, we were the ones that needed to get this bat out of the house. And so we were looking around trying to figure out like what we could use to get this bat out of the house. And it's their like vacation house that we were at. So there's like nothing there. And so we were looking around. We finally found these old school crab nets. Like, you know, the ones with like the long wooden pole and the big like metal top with the green netting in them. I don't even know if the bat could stay in there, but that's all we could find. And so we found a couple of those nets. And our plan was to take those crab nets, trap this bat, and then sprint it out of the house. Which is a pretty terrible plan now that I think about it out loud. But that's what we did. That's the only tool we had, so we just tried to use it, and it took us like an hour. It was totally ridiculous, but you know, we got it out eventually and saved us all, so we didn't get rabies. But you know, that's a totally ridiculous story, but the only tool we had to get that bat out of the house were those crab nets, and we used them. And look, the tool that we have to fight negativity in our lives is thankfulness. And when we're stuck on our problems, the things that don't go according to plan, the things we're frustrated by, we can really get into a cycle of negativity, and the negatives are so easy to see. They are so easy to see. I feel like in life there's always a magnifying glass on all the things that are not going according to our plans and the things that we want to complain about. And when we're so focused on those things, on all the negatives, it's easy to miss all the good things that are happening. It's so easy to miss all of the good things that God is doing in our lives and around us, but when we choose to be thankful, we can overcome negativity. Jonah, he was still in a bad situation when he was praying this, but while he was praying and choosing to be thankful, there were so many things he could have been upset about, but he did not let that prevent him from finding the good. He chose to let his thankfulness speak louder than the negativity, and when we're thankful, we can overcome negativity in our lives. Let's hop back into these verses, and we'll drop down a couple down to verse 6. We'll put this on the screen, Jonah 2, verse 6. It says, I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates lock shut forever. But you, O Lord my God, snatched me from the jaws of death. Now, first of all, that is quite a prayer. Jonah's out here talking about the earth and gates and mountains and the jaws of death. When I pray, I just say the word awesome a lot. I'm like, God, thank you for how awesome my coffee was this morning. I got my window up on the 10th try in my car right before it started raining. God, you're awesome. Thank you. But Jonah, his prayer is amazing. Anyway, Jonah's talking here about when he got tossed off the boat. He's thinking about what that experience is like. He's saying he was sinking down in the water. He felt like he was going to drown. And then God rescued him. He says that God snatched him from the jaws of death. And I think what we can learn from what Jonah is going through in this verse, as he's praying to God, is that thankfulness gives us perspective. Thankfulness gives us perspective. He's looking back at this moment where he almost died, and he's praising God for rescuing him, how God intervened when everything seemed hopeless. And as he looks at what God did for him and makes him aware of how serious his situation was, he realizes how close he was to the end of his life. And Jonah's thankfulness opened his eyes to see how God saved him. Now, Emily and I's son, he is almost 11 months old, which is crazy. He's just growing and doing all kinds of new things. And for the past couple of months, the new things he's been doing is getting more mobile. So he's crawling around and trying to stand on stuff. And that's been awesome. It's been terrifying, honestly, but it's been awesome. We got a picture of Taj that we can throw up on the screen. That's him from a few weeks ago. And so he's in this picture. He's standing with the help of our TV stand. And what he's been doing lately is he loves to come over to this TV stand because he can bang on the glass with toys, and it makes a really loud sound. So he loves to hit things with his toys. And so a few days ago, he just came over here, and he was just hitting the glass nonstop. And at one point, he started trying to lick the TV stand, and I don't know what that's all about. I think I set the record that day for the most times saying no before 8 in the morning. It was a lot of times. And I think about our son, he is too young to speak or to fully understand what Emily and I mean when we try to get him to stop doing something dangerous. He doesn't understand why electrical sockets are bad. He doesn't understand why it's not cool to eat random stuff on the floor. He doesn't understand why it's not good to smash glass with things. He just wants to explore whatever is in front of him. But as his parents, Emily and I see this danger that he's getting himself into, and we want to prevent him from getting hurt. So we try to help him understand that things are dangerous by helping him see the bigger picture. And what's so cool about Jonah's prayer here is that his thankfulness is helping him to see the bigger picture. He's being intentional to look beyond what's right in front of him, and he's focusing on how God provided for him. His thankfulness helps him to see the danger that God rescued him from. Look, Jonah was in the belly of a fish. He was still in a bad spot, in a very difficult situation to be in, but he tried to see God's involvement in his life even during that. And because of that, he was able to see that God prevented him from dying. And he could see that God was looking out for him. It's so easy for us to see whatever's right in front of us, our pain, our struggles, our difficulties, our daily grind, whatever it is, we see what is right in front of us, but we can't always see the bigger plan. We can't always see the bigger purpose for what we're going through. Seeing that is hard. It takes effort, and I really think it takes intentional thankfulness. It takes us trusting that God is looking out for us and trusting that he cares about us. And when we look for ways that God is taking care of us, we're going to see it. Jonah, he had to put in a lot of effort to look beyond his immediate circumstances to see how God was looking out for him, but God was looking out for him. And hear this, I believe that God is looking out for us. He cares about you, and he is there for you. Finding things to be thankful for, that helps us to see that. Thankfulness gives us perspective. Now let's hop back in here to the next verse. It'll be verse 9. We'll put this up on the screen. It says, "But I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows. For my salvation comes from the Lord alone." So this is the last part of Jonah's prayer. And what's so cool about this verse is that we see Jonah come to a place where he is aware of how he's fallen short, and he's aware that he's made mistakes, but he's ready to make a real change in his life. This adventure that he's been on, if you want to call it an adventure, is a pretty terrible adventure, but it all kind of started with him choosing to reject God and run away from God. He knew what was right, and he chose to not do it. And that got him into a bad situation. But now he is taking action to be a different person. He is being intentional about changing how he's living. And what we can learn about thankfulness here is that thankfulness helps us to move forward. Thankfulness helps us to move forward. Jonah messed up, and he went through a lot of mess because of that. But here he points to a few actions that he is going to take to move forward. He says that he will offer sacrifices to God with praise, and that he will fulfill all of his vows. He is making real changes in his life and being proactive so that he won't make the same mistakes again. And I think it's so cool that he put actions to his words here. He is so thankful for what God did for him by rescuing him that his thankfulness is causing him to act differently. Thankfulness totally changed him, and that's what thankfulness can do for us. Thankfulness can help us to move forward. There are always things to be frustrated about. There are always things that we can be bitter about, things we can complain about. We can always be angry at our situation or angry with other people. We can be angry at ourselves for mistakes and decisions that we've made. But when we're thankful, when we're focused on the good in life, then we can move forward. We can let go of our pain, we can let go of our frustration and our circumstances, and we can move forward. Check out the last line in this verse. We'll put the next slide up. I love this. This is the last thing Jonah says. He says, "For my salvation comes from the Lord alone." My salvation comes from the Lord alone. So Jonah, he started out the story by rejecting God, and that landed him in a bad spot. But even though Jonah rejected him, God rescued him, even though he didn't deserve it. And because of that, Jonah here is making a recommitment to live for Jesus. Jonah said, "Look, I have disobeyed God. I have ignored the way God told me to live, and the result of that was awful. And so I'm going to change how I live. I'm going to live for God now. I'm not going to live for myself. I'm going to obey him and praise him." And Jonah says that his salvation comes from the Lord alone. And look, that's where our salvation comes from as well. Our salvation comes from Jesus alone. We make mistakes. We have times that we ignore the life that Jesus wants for us. We have times where we start making up our own rules about what we think is best for our lives. And man, that's always going to lead us to pain. It's not going to be fulfilling, and it's going to lead us to frustrations and just bad spots in life. But just like God was there for Jonah, Jesus will always be there for us. And he's there to save us from our mistakes. So if you're in a bad spot today and you've made some bad decisions, you've chosen your way instead of God's way, and it's led to pain, know that Jesus is still there for you. God doesn't abandon you. You might feel like you are drowning. You might feel like life is getting the best of you, but Jesus is right there, and he is ready to rescue you. He is waiting on you to call on him, waiting on you to come back to him. Jonah, he went through a lot of pain before he decided to come back to Jesus, and he kept making mistake after mistake and kept making it worse, but Jesus was still there. He was still there waiting for him to reach out, and Jesus is right there waiting for you to reach out. Even when we've rejected God, even when we have chosen our own path, he's still there for us, when we call out for him. Jonah's thankfulness, it calls him to move forward and to make a change. And today can be the day that you choose to make that change in your life. When you choose to say, I have had enough of living my own way. I've had enough of making mistakes. Instead of doing things my way, I'm going to do things God's way now. I'm going to start living for Jesus. Thankfulness is life-changing. It can help shift our focus each moment. And it can also help shift the things that we're living for and what our lives are all about. So I want us to close by looking at a few realistic, practical ways that we can be more thankful. Some things we can do each day, some things we can do each moment that will help us see God's hand in our lives. Things we can do to make thankfulness a habit so that God's love for us is our focus. And look, these are practical things. They may not all be for you, but maybe one of them is. And so the first one is set a reminder on your phone that says to be more thankful. Set a reminder on your phone to be more thankful. I use reminders on my phone for everything. They remind me to take the trash out. They remind me to do the dishes. They remind me to pay my taxes and to create the Walmart pickup order each week. So why not set a reminder on your phone that just says be thankful? And set it for some time in the middle of the day. Maybe it's around the time your kids get cranky and they need to go for their nap, but they haven't gone down for a nap. Or maybe it's when your boss usually comes in and is a little bit cranky in the mornings. Like, whenever you need it, just set a reminder that says be thankful and have it repeat each day. Setting that kind of reminder, it's going to help us to take a moment each day where we just stop and we look around and we focus on the good in life. Second thing is tell somebody in your life that you're thankful for them. It could be your parents, your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, the person that you run into at Wawa. It could be anybody. But tell somebody in your life that you're thankful for them. And be specific. Tell them why they make your life better. Tell them why you are thankful for them and what they do that you appreciate. And the last one, when things don't go according to plan, look for a blessing. When things don't go according to plan, look for a blessing. Look for something to be grateful for. If you get stuck in traffic after church, which you probably will, just be like, hey, look, I got my AC working. It's all good. And then if your AC breaks, at least you still got a car. If your car breaks down, man, you got a great excuse to miss work this week, right? There is always an angle for us to look at our situations and find something to appreciate, find something that God has done for us that we can be thankful for. And there's just something about thankfulness that changes our perspective and brings us joy. It pulls us out of our bubble and it reminds us of how big God is. It reminds us that the God who created the entire universe and created us, he cares deeply about us. And there's always something to be thankful for. We just need to find it, we need to appreciate it, and we need to thank God for it. And look, today, if you are like Jonah and you're at the end of your rope, if you've been walking down your own path and you've been living for yourself and you're not satisfied with the result of that, today can be the day that you choose to live for Jesus. This can be the moment where you let go of your past, you let go of doing things your way, and you start to do life God's way. And look, if that's a decision you want to make, I'll be up here after the service. Our staff and volunteers are always here to chat with you. Thankfulness, it changes the way that we see the lives we get to live each day, and I think that's really awesome. I think we have so much to be thankful for in every single moment. Even when life is super, super hard, God is doing amazing things for us that we can appreciate in each moment. So this week, let's look for the good that God is doing in our lives. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for everything. You bless us in so many ways that we can't even understand or appreciate. And I just thank you for this example of Jonah and how he made some poor choices and he went through some mess, but his thankfulness and him looking to you and how you provided for him, it totally changed his life. I pray, God, that you will help us to look to you and look to how you are taking care of us, to look to how you are loving us and providing for us in each and every moment. And I pray, God, that you will make thankfulness a part of our lives. I pray that in each moment we'll look to see how great you are and how you're taking care of us. And I pray that you'll bless everyone's week. I pray that we'll have a great day in your name. Amen.